Multiplying Decimals, Lesson 2. Let's begin multiplying decimals by estimating 3.6 times 4.2. Now, as we practice our rounding, we need to remember that we want to round these to a whole number. It doesn't say that in the problem, but that's the easiest way to estimate these, as whole numbers. Remember that when we round whole numbers, we look at the ones digit, the digit in front of the decimal, and we assess the very next digit. Because that digit is greater than 5 or 5 and greater, we add 1 to that ones place, and that digit now converts to 4. We can do the same thing for 4.2. We're looking at that ones place and the digit right next to it. Because that number is less than 5, we leave that number as it is. We leave that ones place as it is. So here, we're just multiplying 4 times 4. That answer will give us approximately 16. Let's continue with problem 2. If we are looking at that ones digit, we look at the number directly next to it, in this case, which would be a 0. So that means we leave that 2 directly as it is. Let's continue. We're looking at that ones digit, and 8 is 5 or more. So that means we add 1 to that 8. 2 times 9 is approximately 18. Problem number 3, if we're looking at that ones digit, we're going to look at that number directly next to it, which is 5, less than 5. So that means we leave that 3 exactly as it is, and everything else changes to a 0. 7 is greater than 5. So that means we add 1 to this initial ones place, which gives us an 8. 3 times 8 is approximately 24. So if we are multiplying these decimals and we are estimating, we can say that problem number 1 is approximately 4 times 4, which is 16. Problem number 2 is approximately 2 times 9, which is 18. And problem number 3 is approximately 3 times 8, which is 24. When we are multiplying decimals, we have to make sure that we follow these steps. Step number 1 is to count out the decimal for each factor. Step number 2 is to multiply the numbers as we would if they were whole numbers. And step number 3 is to count the decimals back into the answer. Let me show you what I mean by that. So for this first problem, we want to count out the decimal. That means that decimal has to cross 1, 2 spaces in order to get out of that problem. For 3.6, that decimal has to cross 1 space to get out of that problem. So essentially, it took us 3 spaces to move that decimal completely out. And when we move that decimal out, we have 102 times 36. Now from here, we're just going to multiply as if these are whole numbers. 6 times 2 is 12. Carry the 1. 6 times 0 is 0 plus 1, which is 1. And lastly, 6 times 1 is 6. Now we're going to add in our place value holder so that we can move over and begin multiplying that 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 0 is 0. And 3 times 1 is 3. From here, we just add those two numbers together. 2 plus 0 is 2. 1 plus 6 is 7. And 6 plus 0 is 6. 3 does not have anything to add to it, so we just bring that 3 there. Now, the way that we move that step number 3 to move that decimal back in is we just count it back in. 1 space, 2 spaces, 3 spaces. So that means our decimal should land between the 3 and the 6, giving us an answer of 3.3. 672, or 3 672 thousandths. All right, let's try a few more. Remember, when we don't see a decimal, we don't have to worry about counting it out because it is actually at the back of our number. So here we have no decimals to count out. We just leave that one as 41. As our next one here, you notice that we have to count that decimal out one space. So that one is going to give us a value of times 75. Now, when we line those up directly on top of each other, just to multiply those as whole numbers, we're going to work in two different colors here. So I'm going to try first with green. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 4 is 20. Please remember to add your zero place value as we move over to the 7. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 4 is 28. We add those two together. 5 plus 0 is 5. 7 plus 0 is 7. 2 plus 8 is 10. So we carry the 1 there. 2 plus 1 is 3. Now in this problem, we're only moving that decimal back in one space. So there's our 1 there. That gives us a total value of 307 5/10. All right, let's try again. 0.4, that means we need to move that decimal out one space. 0.5, that means we need to move that decimal out as well, one space. And 0.2, we need to move that decimal out one space as well. That means we have moved these decimals 3 spaces in order for them to get out of all of the factors. That gives us a value of 4 times 5 times 2. Now we can do this in order and do 4 times 5 first, which will give us 20, but we always have to remember to bring down that times 2. Do not forget to bring down your work. Next, we have 20 times 2, which is 40. Now, there's absolutely another way that we could have done this, and we could have used this mental math. 4 times 5 is 20, times 2 is 40, and it'll work out just the same way. Because we need to move our decimal place back in 3 spaces now, we still have to do that. Even if we got a whole number answer is 40, we move that decimal back in. Now we notice here we need to move it one additional space, and we do not have a 0 there, so we can just annex and add 1 in. And we remember that we're moving that decimal to fall in line where it should be. So that means that this answer would be 400ths. Now we have an additional 0 here in the back for 400ths, and we really don't need to add that one in. So we can complete this answer as 400ths in that manner. All right, let's show our skills and see if we understand how to multiply decimals in a real world problem. One year, Texas had about 2.6 times as many head of cattle as Oklahoma. Oklahoma had 5.2 million cattle. So how many head of cattle did Texas have? Now, because Texas was 2.6 times as many head of cattle as Oklahoma, that means we're going to take the value of Oklahoma and multiply it by 2.6. That will give us a problem of 5.2 times 2.6. Now we have to remember to count the decimals out. So here we're counting it out one space. Here we're counting it out one space. Now you might be asking the question, do we always count the decimal out to the right? And the answer is yes. We are multiplying each of these by 10. So 5.2 means we're multiplying 5.2 times 10 to give us the value of 52. 2.6 we're multiplying by 10 to give us a value of 26. So in this problem, we're essentially multiplying 52 times 26. And let's line those up. So let's start with the 6 first. 6 times 2 is 12. Carry the 1. 6 times 5 is 30. Plus 1, 31. And then we jump over to that 2. But before we do, we have to make sure that we add a 0 place value there. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 5 is 10, and we're going to add those two together. 2 plus 0 is 2, 4 plus 1 is 5, 3 plus 0 is 3, and 1 is all alone, so it gives us a 1352. Now, we cannot forget that we have to move those decimals back in because we moved this one space and this one space. That means our total that we moved the decimal back in is 2 spaces. 1, 2. So that means our decimal should drop right there between the 3 and the 5, which will give us a value of 13 and 52 hundredths. All right, thank you for learning with me. Happy learning.